I think we are good. Ladies and gentlemen, we have all the free agent news. DK Metcalf's Steeler. Godwin is in Tampa. Updated ranks on the site. If you're already a member, you can go ahead, hit sort by Mason Dodd. You can see 310. We already got those all out for you to check out. And I will be looking at those as we go ahead and as we get this startup draft underway, because your boy needs to make sure that he is not an idiot here and he is giving y'all decent rankings on the site. So I need to test them out in a live startup draft. And at the same time, we are actually going to be looking at some dynasty teams at the very end of this so we can give some actionable advice for members of the site. We got a lot going on. This is our first live stream of the season. Your boy's excited. And yes, we are going to be picking in here at pick 6. Just getting my rankings up, and these are going to be the Dynasty Superflex ranks on the site because we are drafting a Superflex team here. So really, out of the first 4 picks, the main thing that stands out, of course, is Lamar at the 101. You're really not going to see that at all. Then 9 times out of 10, you're going to see some order of Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, and then really that's about it. Going through and looking at my highest ranked player here, I personally have Justin Jefferson ranked 1 slot ahead of Jalen Hurts. And like I said, I'm testing out these rankings, right? So if I have Jefferson ranked 1 spot ahead of Hurts, we are going to take him here at the 106. We are going to see what happens the rest of the way. And if I need to adjust it, we need to adjust. But it looks like we got people in the chat asking if it's super flex. So let me let them know that it is. And after we take Jefferson, Jalen Hurts goes. That's who I had after in my rankings here. So obviously not too big of a surprise. And dear God, I'm just excited to be live streaming again. We have not done this in forever. Moving this around. And also, I do not have a second monitor at this setup currently. So maybe a little bit of a tougher thing to navigate, but nonetheless. Bijan ends up going here at pick 10. Bowers goes at the 109. Looking at my rankings, the players that I have ranked in this range are actually the wide receivers. Like I have Puka Nacua, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors as the best players available on the board. I have Puka ranked at 8 overall. If you actually look at the average expert rankings on flockfantasy.com, he's ranked at 9th overall. So it does appear to be, whether you're looking at the average of guys like Dynasty Land, Dynasty Domain, Fantasy Stock Exchange, myself, obviously you can pull up all the rankings that you want to see on the site. It does appear that Puka Nacua is the best value. You actually have Trustlock going with Barkley at the 1-2 turn. Barkley, in my mind, massive reach here. Like going through and looking at where Barkley is in the average expert ranks, Saquon Barkley has an average expert rank as a 3rd round startup pick. I have the same thing here. Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm fine with at the beginning of the 2nd round. There are a few players that I probably would have preferred. Like if you're looking at my individual rankings, I actually do have Malik Neighbors ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. Maybe a quarterback or 2 here as well. Justin Herbert, not necessarily the quarterback I would have gone for. Malik Neighbors finally off the board, 203. Puka Nacua finally off the board at the 204. Would be interesting to know y'all's thoughts on the chat of if that is a reach here on Puka. There are 2 players that I'm fine with, 3 players that I'm honestly kind of fine with here at the 206. I definitely know the 2 that I'd be looking at based off my ranks here. So Genty goes. So I was either between Brian Thomas or Ashton Genty. So now that Genty's off the board, it's going to be a very easy selection for me to go ahead and take Brian Thomas at the 207. Based off the fact we didn't take a quarterback in round 1, maybe we'd be more inclined to go with my highest ranked quarterback, which would be Caleb Williams here. But I think we have a better shot to get a quarterback that I like coming back around to us in round 3. Whereas I feel like you kind of got to pull the trigger on Brian Thomas at the 207. I feel like this is a very interesting startup draft. And let me move this over. I see Benny in the chat says, Mason, we don't like the Lakers in here. Well, I am in LA at the moment. And because I'm in LA at the moment, we gotta rock the Lakers. I went to a Lakers game. I don't know if I told this story on live stream. Hell, I haven't been live streaming at all. So this should be a brand new story for y'all. Went to the Lakers game last week, 10 days ago or so. LeBron was 18 points away from scoring 50,000. And he scored 17. So, tough scene to say the least. Drake May finally off the board of the 210. If you actually look at the average expert ranks on the site, like, especially the guys at the Fantasy Stock Exchange, they are just so damn high on Drake May that Drake May has like an average ranking on the site to go at the end of round 1 of startup drafts. I think personally, I'm a little bit lower compared to the other analysts on the site, where I think Drake May is a completely fine pick here at the end of the second round. Don't get me wrong. I think he's appropriately priced. Like, I would prefer Brian Thomas over Drake May, as you can tell with what I did with my own rankings here. But let's go ahead and let's move this around. So who is highest on the board according to my ranks? So Bowers went off. I guess I have Bowers maybe a little bit lower than where he went in this draft. I have Bowers ranked as the 18th best player, right behind Ginty. And Bowers going at the 109. Maybe that is something I need to reevaluate. But again, the person who selected Bowers does have a Raiders logo on their profile pic. JSN off the board at the 303. JSN, the last wide receiver standing in Seattle. And your boy better figure out who he's picking soon. CJ Stroud, 302. I really like that value. I have CJ Stroud ranked as a late second round startup pick. Going through Ladd McConkey, great value. I had Justin Herbert ranked at the 2-3 turn in my rankings. So it does look a little bit rich for him to go at the beginning of the second round. Do I have Jordan Love as the highest ranked player for me here? Yeah, I have Jordan Love as my highest ranked option. I think we go ahead, take him here in the third. Not only is he the highest ranked player on my board currently, I have Jordan Love ranked as the 29th highest player as my QB 11 right now in my startup ranks. If you look at the average expert rank on the site, Jordan Love's ranked as the 25th highest player going at the 2-3 turn. So kind of regardless, I think right in line with what you would expect for the Jordan Love price point. While at the same time, we start wide receiver with Jefferson and Thomas. So I think it's a completely fine start out the gate, right? Definitely gives us the flexibility where I'm not super stressed of like, oh, this has to be a contending team. We have to go through and target guys like McCaffrey, Henry in the later rounds, but also it's not like we have to look to build for 2026. I mean, this team definitely can make noise this season. Okay. Benny says thoughts on Geno to the Raiders. I think it'll be an improvement in comparison to what the Raiders had at quarterback last season. I don't necessarily know if it's like a massive upgrade in comparison to what you were looking at for 2025. Because, I mean, I guess the range of outcomes for the Raiders in 2025, right, is you either bring in a rookie quarterback, you bring in Rodgers, you bring in Darnold. And out of all those options, I don't want to sit here and act like Geno is a phenomenal, but Geno should be better than what they had last season at the very minimum, right? I mean, really the only relevant pieces here would be for deep dynasty leagues. Like if you're in a start 11 league, maybe it makes Jacoby Myers more exciting, or maybe you think Brock Bowers needs to move up the rankings in general, in which, again, I had Bowers ranked as a second round startup pick, and here he goes at the 109. So maybe he is going to be moving up. But Bucky Irving off the board at the 311. I personally have Bucky Irving actually ahead of Breece Hall in my dynasty rankings at the moment. Trey McBride goes at the 312. I actually don't mind that at all. So let's move this over. And yeah, so I guess the big things that we need to be looking, because the issue is, right, a lot of these free agents, such as Justin Fields, I guess maybe you can say Fields has an impact in determining where Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall are going to go in this draft. But I would say, I think that Fields, I don't want to say it was worst case scenario for Garrett Wilson. I mean, definitely a great scenario, great landing spot for Justin Fields himself. You like to see the money. You like to see the fact that he has weapons, but it's not like you're ever projecting Justin Fields to be above average at the passing volume in the offense. So I think Fields going to New York actually hurts Garrett Wilson in comparison to what they could have been looking at, either with a rookie quarterback or instead, if they were to gone out there and got somebody like Sam Darnold, got somebody like Geno Smith. So if you actually look at where I moved Garrett Wilson in my dynasty ranks, I moved Garrett Wilson a little bit lower. I moved Wilson down to being a wide receiver that should go at the 3-4 turn. And interesting, there are actually a couple players that, and also, please, for the love of God, don't be using the sleeper ADP that you see here. This sleeper ADP is very, very bad, right? I don't think anybody here should be considering a selection where they go through and they take Sam Laporta or they take Kyron Williams. At the very minimum, go to the site, and the expert average overall ranks on flockfantasy.com are going to be completely free. So even if you're not a paid member, please be looking at the site for the free expert average ranks, because I think that should do a little bit better than what the sleeper ADP is. And honestly, I actually don't mind at all looking at the quarterbacks here. Looking at who I have ranked as the next best quarterback, I do have it as Brock Purdy. It's not too far off between Baker Mayfield's, but I have Purdy, Baker, a tier ahead of what you're looking at with the Trevor Lawrence, Michael Penix options. And then I have Jared Goff right there. Actually, I have Jared Goff sandwiched right in between them. But nonetheless, I think we want to go ahead and take Brock Purdy here, no matter how you cut it, especially knowing that we start off wide receiver, with Jefferson and Brian Thomas, right? So completely fine with this. I think that the rookies here are strong values, like Hampton. In comparison to Kyron Williams, I'd probably rather have Hampton at this point. In comparison to Jonathan Taylor, I think it's pretty close and kind of up to you. But again, going back to what you're looking at when it comes to the sleeper ADP, these rookies are going to be pushed down. So just try to ignore this if you can. And if you're not seeing the rookie picks over here on the rankings on the site, just make sure you hit show draft picks. And then you'll see the rookie picks get added on, right? So you'll see like, oh, this is where the 101's valued, right behind Bowers, Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, according to the average expert ranks. And then also you can look at the rookie rankings as well on the site, but those are separate. But nonetheless, the point is try not to be using a sleeper ADP when you're in these drafts, because I don't necessarily know. I think it's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you, to be honest. Andrew says, hopefully getting my team reviewed soon now that you're back on. Thanks, Mason. Thank you, my friend. And I will be reviewing teams right after this. I actually have all that stuff pulled up here, and we are going to be looking at a lot of teams right after this draft. I was actually in Dallas for a wedding this weekend, so I sadly was not able to look at anything like over the past week, really. Okay, so let's move this over. Swizzworld says he can't see the stream. Is anybody having a hard time seeing the stream? Ugh. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. And also, if you have not done so already, please hit that like button, ladies and gentlemen. First live stream of the year. Completely different setup. And I will say, okay, this is an auto pick. Thank God. I was going to say, I really do not like the Chuba price in startups at the moment. If you want to go ahead and take him in a redraft league, you do you, but in a startup draft, I am not too big of a fan. And let's get my rankings pulled back up here, because I got to start figuring out who we're going to take again. I actually don't mind the idea of dipping my toe back into the quarterback position. I know we just took Jordan Love, Brock Purdy the last 2 rounds, but looking at some of the options that we could have here, maybe I need to move these middling quarterbacks down my ranks a bit. Baker Mayfield goes. Am I crazy to want to take a quarterback here in either Dak, Goff, Lawrence? I think I may just pull the trigger on Goff. I think we just may take 3 middling quarterbacks in a row here. Warren goes immediately after the 507. We take Goff. I feel very confident that we have 3 quarterbacks that we're going to be able to kind of go back and forth with based off matchups this next season, while at the same time, guys that have job security for the foreseeable future as well. So, I don't know. Very interesting. This is my first startup draft that we've done this year. Really, the only times I've looked at startup drafts is whenever I'm watching the Domain guys, whenever I'm watching the Land or FSC guys do their startup mocks. But after we take Goff, the hope is, of course, that you see guys like McCarthy, Lawrence, Dak Prescott, all go off the board immediately after, because I do think a lot of those quarterbacks are kind of in a similar tier. Okay. Let's move this over. Avery says, well, look who went live. Maybe we're back, my friend. Maybe we'll see. Maybe we have a bunch of teams that we need to look at after this. I'll pull a Dynasty domain. We'll be streaming for the next 7 hours, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be here for 7 hours. So Dak goes there at the 511. So definitely makes me feel better about the Goff pick, right? That you see the quarterbacks go immediately after. And I think it does give us some flexibility with the different positions that should be coming back to us. get my rankings up. And the Metcalf finally off the board here at the 512. So, I mean, my thing with Metcalf is he has had one season finishing higher than the wide receiver 20 throughout his entire NFL career. He goes to a team where it is difficult to project out the overall passing volume. The man does turn 28 this season. But the saving grace, I don't want to say the saving grace, but what is just crazy is not only did the Steelers pay the capital, the draft capital of the Seahawks to go get him, but they also give the man like $150 million. So very, very bullish for Metcalf on that front. But I think it'll be a lot easier to pull the trigger on him when you have a better idea of the actual passing volume projection. And then looking at Sam Darnold going to the 603, I mean, you get the guaranteed money, right? I do think that Darnold is going to be an upgrade in comparison to what you have with Geno Smith, but a lot of it hinges on what the actual supporting cast is going to be around Darnold. You have JSN, but they essentially wipe everything clear in Seattle beyond that. Okay, so you have Xavier Worthy getting arrested, which who knows what comes of that. To be honest with you, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be much. I think Flowers was my next pick. Now I think it's going to be between a receiver. And I think we probably come away with Xavier Worthy here. Completely understand the hesitation surrounding the arrest, right? But again, I think we have seen time and time again, whether it's the Rashee Rice situation last year, the Jordan Addison situation over the past 2 years. Frankly, I don't know how much it matters for the NFL. Like, I don't necessarily know if they are going to go ahead and decide to punish him whatsoever. Okay, let's move this over. And after we take Worthy, DJ Moore goes. Yeah, so the wide receivers that I think were in consideration there were effectively Worthy, DJ Moore, and I was possibly going to take Zay Flowers there in the middle of the 6th. A big reason with that is the Worthy arrest. But again, I think especially the time of the year where it's March, I think that this is going to just kind of get dealt with. Devon says no third round reversal. No, I honestly don't think it matters too much. Quishon Judkins going at the 609. Judkins looks to be a great pick. Burden here at the 610 as well. Obviously, Judkins just comes out there and absolutely smashes the NFL Combine. I would say if you're looking at rookie prices, Judkins here at the end of the 6th looks a lot better than Henderson there at the 410, at least in my mind. Jordan Addison to the 611. I think Addison's a completely fine pick. I know that there are some rumors about Minnesota actually going through and replacing Darnold with another quarterback that's not McCarthy, which is very interesting to hear, like, Minnesota's name get thrown out there with a bunch of these quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers. Like, why the hell are you even going to bother there? Okay. So Kamara at the 701. This is going to be a big stance that I take. And again, I made an entire video about this, and I want to be on record saying that I myself, as well as the vast majority of people who make Dynasty fantasy football content or fantasy football content in general, I think most drafters, we were all way too low on the veteran running backs last year, right? Derrick Henry, I was scared, this is going to be a running back that's 31 in January, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter at all. Derrick Henry's a league winner with where he's going both in Dynasty and redraft. Alvin Kamara, a pseudo league winner with where he's going in Dynasty and redraft last year as well. I mean, you can look at a large list. James Conner, throw him on there, right? With all the concerns that you had with Trey Benson. People in general overreacted to running back age historical cliffs that we have seen over the past 2 decades with the running backs last year, and the running backs last year defied the odds and they smashed. But now that they're another year older and that they are more expensive than they were last season, I actually do think that people are maybe swinging too far in the other direction and correcting too far the other way. And I think my stance is kind of going to be against these veteran running backs, where I would probably rather have Worthy, rather have Flowers over somebody like Derrick Henry. Okay, let's go ahead and let's figure out what we are going to be doing. So looking at the rankings, Jamison Williams, TJ Hawkinson are back-to-back. I want to say a quarterback should be Bryce Young is the highest ranked player on the site. Of course, the issue is we already have 3 quarterbacks. Are we really in a mock draft going to want to go through and try to take another and just say, oh yeah, we'll trade this dude? Or do we want to actually play it as if we're giving ourselves a shot to win? If you're playing it as if you were giving yourself a shot to win, I don't think you would do this. But maybe this means I need to go ahead and I need to actually let off some steam with some of the quarterback rankings here. Jamison Williams was the second highest ranked player according to the site outside of Bryce Young. I was thinking of Shedeur Sanders, but again, if you listen to a lot of what was coming out of the NFL Combine, a lot of it was that Sanders just wasn't anywhere close to where people were initially projecting them on NFL draft boards. So if we're revisiting our previous quarterback picks and trying to determine maybe where we shouldn't have taken a quarterback, that way it was more acceptable to take the quote unquote falling value with Bryce Young at the 706. Looking at Goff at the 506, the player that we probably would have taken instead would have been a wide receiver in a similar range to what we were looking at with Worthy, Flowers, Olave anyway. So I don't necessarily know if Goff was the wrong selection. Looking at Brock Purdy, where we took at the 407, who we would have taken instead, probably would have been T. Higgins or either Hampton. Jordan Love at the 306. I think the opportunity cost there, you could have made an argument for McBride. Could have made an argument for Ted McMillan, I guess, maybe if you don't want to take Garrett Wilson anymore with the Justin Fields news. So definitely want to say, like, obviously does not feel good taking 4 quarterbacks in a mock draft and just going, oh, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the value. If this was a real league, we'd be looking to trade one of these quarterbacks, obviously, when the opportunity presented itself. But going through and revisiting our previous quarterback picks, I don't necessarily know if the opportunity cost was too much where we shouldn't have taken them, right? Like, I feel decent about getting Bryce Young the same round Matthew Stafford and Justin Fields go. Austin says, I think passing on Love for Tet was the move. I would agree if we were looking at the quarterback selections. I think that passing on Love for Tet McMillan would have been the better play. Like, if we had to get rid of Love, Purdy, Goff, and looked at the opportunity cost of those quarterbacks. Okay, but now we got to figure out where we are going after this. So I kind of have an idea of who we'd want. Obviously, Pickens is taking the hits with the addition of Ayuk goes here at 803, but yeah, Pickens taking the hit with Metcalf coming in. Evans has Godwin going back. You have a couple running backs here if you're trying to contend. I don't necessarily know if our team's set up in a way that we can easily contend. Sorry, I'm having to scroll down just a bit because, again, the sleeper ADP is no bueno. Okay, I have 2 players on my mind, maybe 3 players on my mind that I wouldn't mind. I mean, that I wouldn't hate here. Hawkinson goes. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking between Loveland and Caleb Johnson. Howard Warren goes to the 507. Looking at, I mean, Dalton Kincaid goes at the 708. I think Loveland's maybe more guaranteed to get the capital and you're less concerned with what you're going to have in terms of the landing spot. Plus, you can make an argument. Yeah, Caleb Johnson immediately goes after. I think you wanted to take one of the rookies there. And TJ Hawkinson probably would have been my pick if Loveland didn't make it. But in comparison to the other tight end prices in this draft, or at least the tight ends in Kincaid, Warren, I'm fine pulling the trigger on Loveland here as somebody that looks like they're almost guaranteed to get round 1 capital at this point, and maybe a little bit less landing spot dependent of Caleb Johnson. I think Caleb Johnson's a great pick. Don't get me wrong. The 3 players we are looking at, Hawkinson, Loveland, Caleb Johnson. Those were the 3 guys that we were considering. Okay. Austin says, main takeaway from the trade is Pickens isn't going to be on the Steelers past 25, which helps him, in my opinion. It doesn't hurt, obviously. The issue with Pickens, again, is another great example, and I'd almost say that Metcalf's the same thing, right? Where the highlights look great, but in terms of the way that they win, it doesn't necessarily help a ton for fantasy purposes. Like, Pickens isn't generating separation, right? He's not getting flooded with targets. When he gets targeted, a defender is going to be on him, and if he comes down with the ball, it's going to look awesome. He's going to look super talented. But you'd almost rather just have the guy that's actually going to be able to generate the separation. Okay, so Judy goes to the 901. And at one point, I mean, don't hate me if we do decide to go ahead and take George Pickens here. It may get to a point where Pickens falls enough and he's not a horrible value. Where's Anthony Richardson when it comes to the rankings on the site? Pacheco goes. Okay. Yeah, Richardson is the 105th ranked player on the site. And obviously, I'm not sitting here wanting to take another quarterback, considering the fact that we already afford these guys. Just wanting to see how far he is falling. And Jalen McMillan, I believe, is ranked ahead of Richardson on the site. I actually wouldn't go in that direction. Can we see what rookie? So the best rookie available is going to be Travis Hunter. So a lot of it comes down to, are you willing to just take the swing and possibly eat a massive L if Travis Hunter is indeed just the defensive back? Two players I'm looking at. I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to take it safe. I'm going to take Chris Godwin here. Travis Hunter does immediately go after. Again, I have no idea. What I do 9 times out of 10, and y'all see this in all my videos, is I try to look at historical examples, try to figure out what can we learn from what happened 10 years ago. If it was 10 years ago, we can remember it. Or what can we do 15 years ago or 20 years ago? I'm not going to remember it. Can we look back and figure out something? I can't remember it. I can't see anything that ever looks like Travis Hunter before. So I just can't have a take. I have no freaking idea. If the dude's a receiver, it's the best pick in the entire draft. If he's a defensive back, even if he plays 30% of the offensive snaps, I don't think he's going to be startable in fantasy. Godwin, I think, is honestly one of the best dynasty values at the moment, as well as one of the best redraft values. Like if you look at where he's going in underdog drafts. So I'll take Godwin here in the middle of the 9th. Now that he re-signs with Tampa, I think that's maybe best case scenario there. And we'll see what happens. Jonnu goes at the 9-10. Yeah, looking at the tight end prices where Kyle Pitts, Tucker Kraft, Mark Andrews go at the 8-9 turn. Jonnu Smith goes here at the 9-10. I actually am very excited about our Loveland pick. I think that was probably the right decision in comparison to the other tight end prices that we discussed previously. Because if we are going to have to take a tight end, right? And one thing to point out in this draft is we have yet to select a running back. So right now we are rolling with Jefferson, Thomas, Worthy, Godwin. Quarterback, we have Love, Purdy, Goff, Young. Tight end, we have Loveland. Obviously, the hope, if this is a real league, is we can go through and we can hopefully leverage one of these quarterbacks once we get to June, July, August, and we have a better idea of what the backfields look like after the NFL draft, and we're able to go ahead and take one of these quarterbacks, such as Jared Goff or such as Brock Purdy, and pivot over and actually get to a different to a different running back. Like, for example, if you like the way that Kyren Williams is set up after the NFL draft, hopefully go through and send somebody like Brock Purdy for Kyren Williams. But not looking like we can do that right now. And honestly, and to be completely honest, obviously, it helps me if Anthony Richardson gets selected here. But seeing Richardson fall to round 10, I would have preferred taking Anthony Richardson in round 10 in comparison to taking Bryce Young in round 7. But at no point can we go through and can we take a 5th quarterback here, even if I'm going to try to use the cop-out. Oh, I would sell him. It's a real league. I'd sell him. Keon Coleman goes at the 10:05. So if we were to look at a running back, Matthew Golden going at the 10:06. Y'all know I'm not a big Golden fan, but phenomenal value in comparison to where the other wide receivers are off the board. Looking at running back, you can make an argument to go with Charbonnet. If you like the talent, you can make an argument to go with James Conner. If you are trying to be productive and win right now, Devontae Adams finds himself in a decent landing spot. I think we probably take Sharp here at the 10:07. You can make an argument, oh, okay, well, now that a lot of these target earners are gone at wide receiver, maybe they have to funnel a few more targets over to the running back position. I'm stretching here, right? But you can make an argument Charbonnet is the more natural receiving back in comparison to what you have with Kenneth Walker. You have both running backs kind of coming to the end of their rookie deal, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen with that situation going into the future. Don't get me wrong, Matthew Golden, a significantly better value than what we see with Charbonnet, James Conner off the board. But sadly, we do not get the opportunity to take him. And of course, I want to, again, double down. I'm not a big fan of Matthew Golden if he's going round 1 of the NFL draft and if he's going to be going at the 106 in rookie drafts. But if you're looking at Matthew Golden in comparison to Keon Coleman, give me Golden. In comparison to Jacoby Myers, give me Golden. In comparison to Josh Downs, give me Golden. And not even remotely close. In comparison to Jackson Dart, give me Golden. Rod, I think you can make an argument of him over McMillan, him over Pickens, him over Judy, him over Pearsall. I think you can make an argument of Matthew Golden belonging up there and kind of the beginning of round 8. So if Matthew Golden ends up getting valued where Xavier Worthy's Zay Flowers are, I think he will be significantly overvalued. But if you're getting him here in comparison to Keon Coleman, Jacoby Myers, one of the best picks of this entire draft. Milrow at the 11:01. Okay, so Anthony Richardson's the best value on the board by far. Connor Brown says it was between Golden or Sharp for me. Yeah, I definitely think you made the right decision with Golden. Milrow off 11:01. I would definitely prefer Anthony Richardson, even if Anthony Richardson's a bomb real life quarterback. You still get some of the rushing upside there. Going over and looking at the running back position, Devin Neal, Michael Pittman. The Pittman pick was an auto selection. Wide receiver, you have Debo, Leggett. I want to say maybe Leggett is the highest ranked player on my board. Rookies only. Elikio Manor obviously crushes the combine. Scattaboo is somebody that a lot of people are excited about. Isaiah Bond is falling dramatically. If you look at the average rookie rankings of all the creators on the site, Isaiah Bond won't even be close to this range, which I think most people would be in agreement with. Okay, where did my ranks go? Oh dear God, we should have had these pulled up previously. All right, let's get off rookies. I think we want to take a running back. I think we maybe take Stevenson with the hope that he's able to dodge the NFL draft. Not only is he able to dodge the NFL draft, but at the same time that Drake May is able to take a step forward. It's not a horrendous offense, but also the risk that you are taking with these veteran running backs, really outside of a small list of names, is that New England goes out there, they take a running back of significance, they take Judkins, they take Henderson, and Stevenson's an absolute 0 12 months from now, where you can't even get a 3rd round pick from him, for him. So definitely not feeling good. Definitely not feeling good about that. But any other running back on the board, you can say that they are not even worth a third-round pick 12 months from now. DeAndre Swift may not be worth a third-round pick 12 months from now. Trey Benson may not. Najee Harris may not. Tony Pollard may not. J.K. Dobbins may not. Tajay Spears, Aaron Jones. Actually, I'm an idiot, but the player that we should have taken may make it back to us in this next round. So we will see. We'll see. The Hot Nichols says, has anyone heard about Kyler Murray being traded to the New York Giants? I have not. I will pull this up on a new window. I am going to assume that Kyler Murray is not being traded to the New York Giants. Yeah, I don't see anything on Twitter. So other than Kyler Murray traveling to South Korea. Okay, Ollie Gordon goes at the 11-11. Head of Scattaboo. Trey Benson goes at the 11-10. P-Dunk says, people asking where the underdog drafts are at. Your boy is taking a breather at the moment. All right. Obviously, 2 years ago, we streamed for like 250 days in a row. Last year, I think we probably closed in on about 150 days in a row. We are working a ton on the site at the moment to make sure that can be the best that it can be for everybody. Aaron Jones was the guy that I should have taken instead of Ramondre Stevenson. I was hoping Aaron Jones was going to be back on the board at the middle of the 12th. After the contract extension, Jones should be ahead of Stevenson. If he's not already in my rankings, I'm going to fix that today. And this is why we're doing this draft, so I can hopefully go ahead and figure this nonsense out and what I have wrong with my ranks. So I have Aaron Jones. Yes, I have Aaron Jones behind Ramondre Stevenson in my ranks. No, actually, that's a lie. The average expert ranks have Aaron Jones 3 spots behind Ramondre Stevenson. If you look at my rankings, I have Aaron Jones 1 slot ahead of Ramondre Stevenson. Okay, Isaac Grindo. So it looks like those teams are on auto at this point. So hopefully they come back. But Najee off the board at the 12:05. Scattaboo goes 12:06. The rookies that are available: Dylan Sampson, Aomanor is probably the guy that most people are excited about. If we are forced to take somebody here, I think to give ourselves a shot to contend, we probably take just a running back that we know has a contract in Tony Pollard. Again, the issue with any running back in this range, whether it's Swift, Najee, Cam, Pollard, Stevenson, Aaron Jones even included, any of these running backs is 12 months from now, the 401 could be worth more than them. So, especially this year with a very strong and a very deep rookie class coming in. But anyway, I don't know where I was talking about previously. But anyway, I'm going to hit the ground hard with daily streams and stuff right after the NFL draft. But at the moment, I'm trying to make sure that we have everything in place to make those the best that we can. And I'm trying to kind of reload. That way I have the energy to not only do the daily streams once the NFL draft gets here, but make the daily streams great, if that makes sense. It's like, and this is just, Benny says, question, Mason, do you think your chances to win first place in best ball tournaments would be higher if you didn't stream all the expert information and make your competition harder? Realistically speaking, right? So say I didn't stream any underdog drafts and instead I did them all myself. Maybe I get an extra 1 to 2 or 3% edge to keep all my little theories that may or may not be right, may or may not be wrong, to myself. Maybe that helps me a little bit. Maybe it helps me. Let's go crazy and say maybe it doubles my chances of winning a tournament. Business-wise, I will still make more money. Obviously, unless I won the tournament, then that's different. But your odds of winning the tournament, if they double, they go from 1% to 2%. Let's see what we're doing here. Running back. We may take Jalen Warren. Yeah, we are just going to take Jalen Warren and continue to just play the musical chairs game at the running back position. Well, I do hypothetically. Let's say, oh, I'm giving out and I'm not saying this is true. We're going through a hypothetical scenario. Hypothetically, my odds to win an underdog tournament right now are 1%. Hypothetically, my odds are cut in half because I'm giving away all my crackpot theories on blah, 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 blah. So if I didn't stream, my odds would be at 2%. Still, business-wise, it makes sense for me to stream, right? It's not like I'm giving the value I'm giving away is screwing me over to that extent. So I'm not going to try to fool myself into thinking that my little secrets and my little theories are that valuable that it would be better for me to keep them all to myself, if that makes sense. But yeah, like just as an example of like what I've done in the past, because y'all know in the past I would go through and I'd make like Dynasty videos every single day. And a lot of the videos wouldn't actually be that useful, right? Like say an example for a video is I look at 10 Dynasty trades and I grade each one and I talk about why I think this trade wins versus why I think that trade wins. Maybe it's a little bit useful, but it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel. It's not like I'm coming up with some massive thing that's helping everybody improve 10x, right? It's mainly entertainment value, maybe some informational value. Like a lot of those videos, not all the videos. So what I decided to do this year is kind of cut out those filler videos that I felt were more just entertainment value rather than like actually trying to give away valuable, useful information, right? Because my end goal is when you watch a video, not only are you entertained, but it's also useful information. And just focus all my attention on like the NFL Combine video I put out, right? Where that took me God knows how many hours of research to figure out exactly what matters, exactly how to present the data, and put out something that is actually going to move the needle and help you in rookie drafts. So this offseason, I'm trying to cut out all the kind of like filler type stuff to make the useful stuff more useful, if that makes sense. At least that's the goal. That's the goal. And also like setting things up to make videos better this season is like a small example. Last year, I didn't really work with any motion graphics people or any graphics people and connect them with the editor and say, oh, what graphics do we want for these channels this year? And a large reason of that is if I'm doing all those Dynasty videos daily, it's just a lot tougher, right? Not a massive fan of him, but if you're looking at the NFL draft capital that he should have, and at the same time, how that draft capital got boosted up by the NFL Combine, I think we are just going to take Alec here. I mean, he's going after Jordan Mason. He's going after Quinn Ewers, right? So I think we are completely fine to pull the trigger here in the middle of the 14th. But anyway, yeah, going back to it, it's like cutting out those filler videos maybe also lets me, from a business perspective, set up like the main videos that matter where I think I am really trying to give useful information and useful data, making those better in other ways as well. So I'm not uploading as much this offseason, really just trying to invest where I need to make things better for y'all. But it looks like most teams are on auto at this point. So let me go ahead and let me show the draft board. So we built around young wide receivers early that hopefully give us a larger runway while at the same time are also going to help us contend in the short term, such as Jefferson, Brian Thomas, Worthy, Godwin. We got a quarterback core of Love, Purdy, Goff, Bryce Young. Didn't want to take the fourth quarterback, but felt like Bryce Young was too good of a value at the 706 to pass up on. Obviously, this is a real league. The hope is at that point, we are going to go ahead and we are going to trade one of these quarterbacks for some more running back production if we determine that we actually can contend this year. We have Loveland at tight end, who hopefully can move the needle year 1, while at the same time give us the extended runway and improve on value going into year 2. And then we have a bunch of just running back dart throws near the end of the draft that maybe can give us the possibility of contention this season. And if things break right, they put us in a spot where halfway through the year, we can make a trade to really turn this team into a contender, to bring in a top running back and to replace one of these filler backs at the bottom. But we are going to dive into a bunch of questions that we have on the site now and try to help some dynasty teams. So I'm going to zoom in here to make this look a little bit better. But this first team, okay, perfect. This looks great. Just in case you don't know, you can always submit your team. You can always submit trade questions, whatever you want, over on flockfantasy.com. You can not only submit to me, but also any of your other favorite creators that you watch, right? This first one coming out from JD Butterbow. I hope I pronounced that correctly, my friend. Sorry for taking so long to check this out for you. Saying, looking for recommendations to tier down and try to contend this year or next. Thank you for what your team does for the community. No, thank you, my guy. Super excited to check this out. So the team here is Gritty Gritty Bang Bang. We are currently 3rd in the league analyzer. This is a 12-team Superflex Start 11 PPR half-point tight end premium. So 12-team Start 11. Wide receiver depth is actually going to matter a ton. If you're playing in a Start 8 format, it doesn't particularly make sense to tier down. However, if you're playing in a Start 11 league, yes, when you get the opportunity, we take that top tier wide receiver, we move down a tier, and we pick up an extra first-round pick at the same time. We are 3rd in the league analyzer, if you look at this. So we are in a pretty decent spot to go ahead and move off of some of this value that we have, right? And quarterback isn't necessarily going to take up a super high percentage of our starting lineup output weekly whenever we are in a Start 11 league, right? If you're in a Start 8 format, you're definitely more so wanting to go through and build around those top quarterbacks because they can make up to like 40% of your output from week to week perspective. Here in a Start 11 format, that is going to be much more neutered by the additional flex spots you're going to have where you can plug in wide receivers. And I 100% agree. This is a spot where we should be tearing down, right? Quarterback, we have Herbert, Tua. We're fine here. I'm not going to sit here and act like we have the strongest quarterback room that's ever been assembled. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't really have a starting quarterback 3. If you get an injury to Herbert, if you get an injury to Tua, you are going to be having to just find an additional starter elsewhere in the lineup, which will be difficult in a Start 11 league in particular. But at the same time, you don't have an opportunity to tier down, particularly at the quarterback position with these 2 QBs that, from what I've seen, not too many people are wanting, right? Going over to running back, we have Gibbs, and that's about it. Javonte Williams, I don't even know if he's getting drafted in redraft drafts at the moment. I don't necessarily see a path for him to be a starting running back at any point, especially if you consider the depth of the running back class coming in this season. So if you're looking at the running back room, I think tearing down from Gibbs is a great move if we can. Now, the issue, of course, is if we are trading away a running back and we are looking for a tier down, what you're going to have to look to do is you're going to have to look to find a team that's a contending roster. There's no rebuilding team, right, that's super excited to tier up to Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think that this could be an example of a player that we look to move off of. And if we go through and if we look at teams that could contend, have additional depth, this is an example of this coming soon team where they are sitting here and they have Bijan, they have Brees, they have Nico, they have London, they have Higgins, they have Olave, they have Ayuk. They have a bunch of starters, right, where it could make sense to go through and pick up an additional piece. And depending on the depth that you feel like you need, there are a couple different paths you could actually work with this team, particularly tearing down from Gibbs to Brees, which at this point, I do think is a pretty significant tier down, and I would be wanting a decent amount of value. And I think you can either look to do it in one of 2 ways. You can look to go down from Gibbs to Brees Hall and pick up an additional pretty strong wide receiver. I mean, obviously, if you could get Brees and London for Jahmyr Gibbs in a Start 11 format, I think it's a no-brainer. I think you could consider Brees and Higgins as well. Or you can look to go from Gibbs to Brees and an even lower tier wide receiver, whether that's Olave and Ayuk, if you get that additional third quarterback, right? So how that would look is going from Gibbs to Brees, but also picking up McCarthy and Olave as well on top of it, and getting the 3 potential starters in a start 11 league in return for that one guy. So I think those are 2 different paths you could take with that contending team. Going over and looking at this team that's definitely a contender, at least I want to say, where they are sitting with Jacob, CMC, Henry, Swift, right? They have the top end wide receivers. I mean, this team definitely should be looking to make trades if they are not wanting to contend this season. It may be a little bit of a tougher path here to make that tier down trade because they don't necessarily have that running back that's anywhere close to Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, you can tier down from Jahmyr Gibbs to Josh Jacobs, but if we're looking at the additional add-on that we are going to get here with an extra starter, I wouldn't trade, even in a start 11 format, Gibbs for Jacobs and DJ Moore, Gibbs for Jacobs and Terry McLaurin. If you wanted to go ahead and instead possibly trade Gibbs, pick up Jacobs, one of the receivers, and the 109 in a start 11 format, I think that could be okay if you are really wanting to contend, get the additional production of DJ Moore, Jacobs, and then that 109 would give you either an extra starter or more flexibility with a different trade. And then going over and looking at the wide receivers, right? That's going to be the main issue of the roster, particularly in a start 11 format where we don't have these starters, is we're sitting here with 3 guys that could be startable, and that's it. We have Jefferson, Neighbors, Rome. Now, these are 3 great assets to build around, but at the same time, I don't particularly see how you could contend with Rashad Bateman Shaheed as your wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 5 in a start 11 format. And if you're wanting to contend, I would say that the clear tier down would actually probably be with Malik Neighbors, because what you could probably do here is with Neighbors, actually the market opens up where you can look to ship him over to a rebuilding roster, right? So we can go through and we can look at a team that maybe has no shot to contend this season, but has some contending assets. And if they want to give up some depth for a player like Malik Neighbors, that would be interesting. So looking at this team, I don't necessarily know if they would be too interested in it, but they probably have no path to contention at the moment, right? They have the same concerns that you do surrounding the depth, where DeMario Douglas is their wide receiver 4. But the difference is you go over and you look at their running back position. They don't have a running back to start this next year. Jonathan Brooks isn't going to play. Tyler Algier is the clear backup to Bijan. So ultimately, this is a roster that looks like they have no shot to contend. So if they were willing to go out there and if they were willing to make a tier up for Malik Neighbors, and if you could sell them on that long-term cornerstone asset for them, I think that could be an interesting pivot for you. But again, the issue is, realistically speaking, what does that trade look like? Maybe you go from a Neighbors to JSN and at the same time pick up Marvin Harrison, right? I think if you could go from Neighbors to JSN and Harrison, it would make sense in a start 11 format where you are looking to contend, and maybe you make the argument if this team's just completely out on Harrison, that's a deal that could get done. Or if you wanted to go from Neighbors to JSN, the 104, and try to pick up an additional smaller piece. But again, you don't necessarily know if this team's going to be wanting to sell rookie picks if you're trying to sell them on being a rebuilding roster. Going over and looking at this team, they just simply don't have enough value for us to be trading with them. This team has a bunch of running back production, and I guess they have the veteran wide receivers here as well as Tyreek and Evans. They don't really have any value on their team, but they probably think that they're a contender. Going over and looking at this team, the issue is some of these teams at the very bottom, and you can kind of see this with the league analyzer as well, just seeing that they only have a third of their the value on their dynasty team that you actually have up there with the top 3 teams. They're not going to be able to make trades. I 100% agree. I think that you're a roster that can look to contend, but the main thing that you're going to have to look to do is that tier down either with Gibbs to a running back and pick up an additional wide receiver starter with those examples that we discussed, or with Neighbors trying to ship Neighbors, or I guess maybe even Rome over to one of those rebuilding teams if we can get an additional asset on top of it that's going to help us contend this season. I'm going over and looking at tight end. Yeah, it sucks that we have Kyle Pitts, but it is what it is, right? I don't necessarily know if in a start 11 format, even if it's a half point tight end premium, that's going to be our biggest area that we need to go through and we need to try to address. I think you're kind of chilling as is. And the 102, 103, I mean, right now it looks like it's going to be Tet and Hampton, but at the same time, I think you should open up yourself the ability to ship one of those picks if you wanted to tier down there, right? So if you wanted to move off of, say, the 102 and pick up a 107 and a future first, I think that can make a lot of sense, where that 107 could still be a player that you're able to start this year and contend with. And that additional future first, maybe you can trade during the season to pick up an additional contending asset once we can actually see who's producing, while at the same time, what teams are looking to rebuild. So I think it's a team with a ton of value, but I completely agree. The strategy should be we tier down. I don't necessarily know if you can sell any of the quarterbacks. I wouldn't mind in that tier down if we can just get an extra QB3 added onto the team. That way we have somebody to start if need be. But yeah, I really appreciate you being a member of the flock, and I really hope that I was able to help you out in some way here, my friend. And what I'm going to do real quick with these reviews is I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to answer a bunch of these trade questions. SM Sullivan, let me hook you up with another free trade question just in case you have any follow-up with this that you want. This is going to be a 12-team, 2-quarterback start 9 Dynasty League, where we're trading Amon-Ra St. Brown for the 102 and the 105. Obviously, very difficult to map out what these rookie picks are. 102 is probably going to be Hampton or Tet, depending on landing spots. Maybe Judkins, maybe Henderson lands with the Chargers in round 1. Then they vault up to the 102. We don't particularly know at the moment, but you have a lot of flexibility with these picks. And looking at the squad here, what team are we? We are, I believe, trading away St. Brown, right? If we are trading away St. Brown, this is a team that probably looks to be a contender. Getting the picks, I don't mind at all. In terms of the value, like, I think the value is on the pick side here. I think I'd rather have the 102 and the 105, particularly in a 12-team Superflex league. However, the hesitation is this is a situation in which you should be contending. So, I mean, could you get a contending piece back even if it's... I know this is dumb, but could you get a Cooper Kupp back? I know I've Kupp ranked at wide receiver 48. I know he doesn't have much value. But could you get a Keenan? Could you get one of these bums, these old dusty veterans back? But yeah, in general, I think that the value aligns with the rookie pick side. My hesitation is that you are a strong contender, which is why we're going through. And I'm hooking you up with that free trade question. That way you can go ahead and you can ask anything additional that you have. But let's run over and let's look at these trade questions here. This is Big Laughter. Says 3 flex. This is a 3 flex is our running back, wide receiver, tight end. 1 flex is running back, wide receiver, kicker. So it's a 4 flex league. That frankly doesn't really matter. A Jerry Jeudy, Gibbs, and the 2025 101. So you're saying it's the 101's on the side as well? If the 101's on the Jahmyr Gibbs side, you go with Gibbs and Genty over Jamar Chase relatively easily, to be honest with you. If it's just Jamar Chase versus Gibbs and Jerry Jeudy, you go with Jamar Chase. But if you're going to get the 101 on that Gibbs side, give me the Gibbs side. TJ is trading the 101 for the 104 and the 112. I still think that there is a big enough teardrop between Ashton Genty and the other rookies in this class that I prefer the 101 here. I think if you were looking at getting the 104, I probably want to pick higher than pick 12. If you were to do this deal, I think I would want, like, if you wanted to do this deal, right? I'm not saying you have to. I think you get the 103 instead of the 104. And I think you ask for a mid-second as well. If that makes sense. I don't know why I had this one away. But yeah, I think you go 112, mid-second. And I don't know where the 103 went. There you go. This would be my counter if I wanted to trade away Genty. But I'm not trading away Genty for the 104 and the 112, regardless one quarterback, super flex, tomato mod. I know that's one quarterback league. Here is 101 versus 104, the second, and Keon Coleman. Still give me the 101. I prefer that other counter we came up with. This is the 101 versus 106, Chuba, an early second. Still give me the 101. 101 versus the 103 in 2 seconds. Again, I think it's better to get the 103 than the 104 initially, but instead of getting 2 seconds, I would rather have one of those picks be the 112. Still give me the 101 in this instance. And Justin Jefferson versus the 108, Malik Neighbors. This is actually an interesting trade here. Looking at the 108, this is a 14-team league. 14-team start 8 format. Looking at the squad, we are number 1 in the league analyzer. 14-team format depth is going to be much harder to come by. My only hesitation is this is definitely a team that looks like they can contend right now, especially in that 14-team format. Can somebody please let me know in the chat, what side would you prefer here between these two? Would you rather have Jefferson or the 108 in Neighbors? I'm going to pull this up in the trade calculator. Let's see what that has to say. Somebody says I would take Neighbors in the 108 all day. Okay, we just pulled this up. Trade calculator as a dead even fair trade as well. Super interesting. I'm going to go to the trade finder and see what the Jefferson versus Neighbors swap price is at the moment. Okay, so here is what the swap price has been. Somebody traded Jefferson for Neighbors, the second rounder in 2026 and 2025 late third. Somebody traded Jefferson for Neighbors in a third. Somebody traded Jefferson for Neighbors in a 2027 first. So it looks like in comparison to what the price is on the open market, especially with the consideration that you are playing in a 14-team format, I think we're probably going to go ahead and take Neighbors in the 108. But that is a super interesting trade. And honestly, I figured that there'd be a little bit of a bigger gap between their values. On this trade here, Nico Collins in the 101. I'd rather have the 101. Give me Genty. Again, I mean, if you map out the possible landing spots for Genty, let's do this together. As I know a lot of people got pissed at the very beginning of the offseason when I put Genty right in between Gibbs and Bijan in our dynasty rankings in the same tier. Everybody lost their mind, but let's do this together, ladies and gentlemen. What landing spot here for Genty makes him worth more or less than Nico Collins? Genty ain't going in the top 4-5 picks. Maybe he starts to be in play here. And of course, Tankathon does not look like this is set up correctly. Let me pull something up. NFL boom, 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 boom. Okay, here, we'll pull this up instead. Actually, this has more ads on it. Never mind. I don't see a possible landing spot for Genty for him to be worth less than Nico Collins. Genty goes to the Bears, he's worth more than Nico. Genty goes to the Raiders, he's worth more than Nico. Genty goes to Dallas, he's worth more than Nico. Ginty goes to Arizona, he's worth more. He goes to Cincinnati, he's worth more. Seattle's not taking him. Indianapolis isn't taking him. Miami's not taking him. San Fran's not taking him. If Carolina takes him, it'll be hilarious. So, I just think if, like, you put yourself in the shoes of, like, thinking about Ginty with an NFL jersey on and what that jersey potentially looks like, if you look at any of the realistic outcomes, I think Ginty is a borderline. Take the quarterbacks out in Superflex. Who would I rather have over Ginty, non-quarterback? Just say one quarterback league. Give me Jefferson, Chase, Neighbors, Thomas. I think he's a borderline top 5 pick. Like, looks like every single one of these trades that we've looked at today, I've been on the side of the 101 if you are getting the 101. P. Dunk says Amon-Ra St. Brown or Ginty. I'd rather have Ginty. Like, the thing is, I don't necessarily think St. Brown helps you that much more to contend this season. And if you look at the range of outcomes of where Ginty, what Ginty can be worth next offseason, I think it can be worth significantly more. Now, let's go ahead and let's dive into our next team from Arm Barn. This is won the startup league. Thank you for all the hard work you put in the website and your channels. Let's keep it going. Off-season moves now for a 10-team Superflex half-point tight end premium. Sold my first for a final push to win the championship. If you win the championship year one, frankly, it does not matter how your team looks like the next offseason. You've most likely paid your league dues now for the next 8 years. You have all the time in the world to rebuild if we need to. Have a couple late seconds. Can we do a private podcast if possible again? Yes, I will do that. We will skip by yours right here, my friend. Instead, we will look at Jopev. Says, I have the 2025 105. I believe it may be time to reset. Only attached to Gibbs and Caleb Williams. I've made the playoffs the past couple of years, never in a position for the title. Have gotten second and third the last 3 years. Well, I would make the argument if you watch the Flock League that the regular season takes skill. Playoffs, anything can happen, right? I mean, hell, I would say in the Flock League, I had the best fantasy football team ever created and somehow managed to get bounced in the playoffs. But that's a different story for a different day. But anyway, let's check out this team. Team is Jobev. It is a 12-team, start 8, 1 quarterback, half PPR, non-tight end premium format. So this looks a lot more like the league settings for a redraft league rather than a dynasty if we are just looking at scoring as well as starting lineup requirements. Obviously much deeper here. We have the 2025 105, which should give us some flexibility to move things around. We are saying we are tied to Caleb and Gibbs. So just from a starter's perspective, like starting off here, we are kind of behind the 8 ball if we are wanting to contend this season in terms of the value that we have. Like there are a couple teams up here. This team has Burrow, CMC, Jefferson, Puka, Godwin, Pickens, Ayuk, McBride. All together, this team has Daniels, Bijan, Neighbors, Smith, Jameson. Like there are some pretty damn good teams in this league, right? So we have some stuff to overcome. We are not ranked automatically at the very top. Caleb, Jordan Love, AR, Rodgers. You're not going to be able to sell AR for anything in a 1 quarterback league. We're not going to be able to sell Rodgers for anything in a 1 quarterback league. We're not going to be able to sell Jordan Love for anything in a 1 quarterback league, right? We are kind of stuck with what we have here at quarterback, and we are honestly kind of just fine with where we're at. Going over and looking at what we have at the running back position, if you're saying that we are locked and loaded into Gibbs, if we were to pivot over to a rebuild, we'd be selling Gibbs, right? So I'm assuming that we are wanting to contend this season and find a way that we can do that. So if we have Montgomery, if we have Pollard, Stevenson, these are running backs that I would say any rebuilding roster should be looking to sell as well. Montgomery, we very much know the role that he is locked into this next season, but at the same time, I would say outside of an injury to Jahmyr Gibbs, you're more likely not looking at a severely capped ceiling for what we are going to see with Dave Montgomery. I understand the offensive coordinator change maybe is overblown here, but still at the same time, you are really going to have to run hot on touchdowns if we get that top 10 finish. Pollard and Stevenson are both going to need to dodge the NFL draft. I'm going over and looking at wide receiver. Terry McLaurin drafted in 2019, but stayed at Ohio State for 5 years. So the dude's pushing 30. Adams is past 30, but finds himself a decent little landing spot and gets some decent money. Jacoby Myers gets a bump with his quarterback play. So overall, I mean, this is a wide receiver room very similar to what we're looking at with the running backs that is built to contend this season, and really not so much for the long term. If you were to pivot over to a rebuilding roster, we sell Terry, we sell Adams, we sell Myers. Going over and looking at George Kittle, same thing at tight end, right? George Kittle built to win right this second. If you were to pivot over to a rebuild, we are looking to sell. But all in all, if we look at every single position and go, this position's built to win this season, the production this year is going to be better than the value 12 months from now, it probably makes sense to make another push to try to win this year. So again, you were saying, I have the 105. If we have the 105, I actually don't mind the idea to try to push forward to really try to win this season. Now, there are a couple different ways that we can do this. Somebody that I've been looking to sell is Jalen McMillan. While I understand McMillan had flashes, if you also look at the setup that he had this past season, it was perfect, right? I mean, one, of course, he absolutely did nothing until you had the Chris Godwin injury, which you can't blame him. The dude is a rookie. But two, you have the Mike Evans injury at the end of the season as well. And if you're looking at what happened with McMillan, he didn't particularly dominate the target volume in Tampa. Instead, what you actually saw is you saw, in my opinion, a very unsustainable touchdown rate with 8 touchdowns through only 37 receptions. Now, it's not the worst thing in the world to see the efficiency be a little bit unsustainable when it comes to particularly rookies, because a lot of times the following year, that rookie that had unsustainable efficiency will actually come out and they will increase their volume as the team incorporates them into their offense more. What you saw with Devon Achane last season. But my hesitation is, now that you have Evans as well as Godwin healthy, I don't particularly know how McMillan sees a massive jump in volume. With McMillan as well, this is a situation in which I don't know if this is a 23-year-old rookie. He turns 24 in December. I personally would be looking to get off of McMillan if we can, especially if you can pivot over to a wide receiver that really is going to be able to move the needle and help us contend in the short term here. So what I would want to do is I would want to try to target one of these teams that maybe is set up with a bunch of rebuilding assets and maybe has no shot to contend this season, right? Like looking at this team here, this team has no shot to contend. Their best players, Rasheed Rice, don't know the health of Rice, don't know the suspension risk. Going over and looking at this team maybe can't contend. They have Derrick Henry, they have Kamara, but I mean, outside of that, very thin roster. They don't have a 2025 first. So this would be a team that very much is on the edge of absolute disaster that I wouldn't mind reaching out to and seeing if we can possibly string together a trade with. Couple different possibilities is, one, if you're able to pivot off of somebody like Jalen McMillan and bring in one of these veteran running backs, whether that's Derrick Henry, whether that's Alvin Kamara, sell them on the fact that McMillan's going to be able to improve over the next 12 months in his dynasty value. Kamara could be an absolute zero if you're looking 12 months from now. If we can make that swap, I think that would be very beneficial if this team decided to pivot over to a rebuild while we're looking to push into contend. I don't necessarily know if they have any of the assets where it makes sense for us to send them our 105, right? Because, I mean, you send them your 105. I mean, maybe if they're willing to give you Henry, Kamara, and Mark Andrews, and we really push our team into a contending build, that can be something that we consider here, but you're going to have to almost have their entire roster outside of Ladd McConkey, at least in my opinion. Going over and looking at this team with top spend, again, an issue that I think you're going to come across here. While this team has absolutely no shot to contend this season, They also don't really have any assets that are worth your 105. You can make an argument that Lamar Jackson would be a nice swap for you if you really wanted to contend and get that elite level quarterback. Send them, say, the 105 as well as Caleb Williams. Try to get Lamar Jackson, but you said that you're not interested in trading away Caleb. So maybe instead here the move is try to send Jalen McMillan and go get somebody like Courtland Sutton. Sell them on the idea that you're taking on the declining asset while at the same time they're getting the ascending one, but we get the short-term production. Going over and looking at this team definitely can contend, right? They have Hurts, they have Barkley. This team here, that they look like they can contend. I doubt that they're willing to just go through and pack everything in right this second. This team has absolutely nothing at the running back position. They have Brian Thomas, they have Marvin Harrison. The concern that you're going to have here is in terms of the contending assets that they have, they don't necessarily have anything that they need to get off their team if they were looking to rebuild for 2026. That team can contend. This team definitely can contend as well. They're going to need to make a play at running back, but we're not necessarily in the market of selling our running backs, right? So I don't necessarily know if there are many moves for you to make other than run it back. I would try to pivot off of McMillan for that veteran wide receiver that's going to be able to help you produce a little bit more than what McMillan can. As we previously discussed, I think that 105 is 100% on the trade block if we can find a rebuilding team that has those veteran pieces that they're willing to move off of and that we are able to get a considerable amount of value for. But I think you're in a decent spot. I'm not a massive fan of, I don't want to sit here and like tell you to sell David Montgomery, because the thing is, like, maybe I'm not a massive fan of David Montgomery and where he just went in our last startup draft, right? But at the same time, David Montgomery is going to fit your roster perfectly. So I'm not in the business of sitting here telling you like, oh yeah, let's contend, let's sell David Montgomery. No, because David Montgomery probably has more value to your roster than he's going to have to somebody else's in your league. So I'd probably just hold on to him there. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way there, my friend. Now, let's move this over to G. Befaro. Says, lost in the championship this year. Need to reload for 2025. I tend to consolidate assets too early and sell at the wrong time. Looking to add Hawkinson or Warren and to find a way to acquire and trade up for Hampton. How should I approach this? What moves would you make? So we are YBN Jameer. Pretty strong team. If you're looking at the league analyzer, there's like a group of 4 or 5 teams here, depending on where you want to put the cutoff, that are far and away better than the rest of the league. You're saying that we lost in the championship, so we are in a really comfortable position in terms of our ability to contend in the short term. Now, I definitely want to point out that we are very much locked and loaded, where we don't have a ton of flexibility here for the long term, right? Where, I mean, we are sitting here with no 2026 first. When we have no 2026 first, you are not able to determine, oh, this isn't my year, let's rebuild, let's go get the 101 in 2026. That's not going to be a possibility for you. So if we are looking at what we are doing, is we are effectively pushing our chips in the middle for 2025. For me, I think that means the 111 is on the block. If you absolutely love Hampton, I would not be looking to I would not be looking to trade to a particular rookie pick right now, because we can say, oh, okay, if you're going to want Hampton, you're going to need the 102. And you could go up and pay a significant price to get to the 102. And at the end of the day, what we may see is we may see Hampton find a crap landing spot. Henderson may go to the Chargers. Henderson's the new 102. Hampton actually ends up falling to the 105. And you didn't need to spend that additional capital to try to get up to that pick. Especially on a contending team, or at least what I believe we are locked and loaded to be, which is a contending team, considering the fact that we don't have our 2026 first. I don't particularly see how it makes sense for us to be making that decision to go and try to trade up for a rookie at this moment. Except if it's Genty, because obviously when you're looking at those assets that are locked and loaded into a specific pick, it's going to be a little bit different. Looking at the quarterback position, this is going to be the most standard dynasty league you're going to play in. 12 teams start 10, PPR, half point tight end premium, Superflex league. We don't have a viable QB3, right? So sitting here at the 111, you actually do give yourself a lot of flexibility where what happens if, I mean, I've seen a lot of people not like Sanders where you have a non-0% chance that Sanders could end up falling to you with that pick. Sanders falls to you at the 111. I don't think we should be really too concerned to just go ahead and take him rather than trade up for Hampton, where we get some locked and loaded value into the future, while at the same time, an asset that could help us contend if we either get an injury to one of our top quarterbacks or just a plug and play guy during a bye week. Going over and looking at the running back position, we have Jahmyr Gibbs, we have Chase Brown, 2 running backs, and you can include Josh Jacobs, 3 running backs that look like they're locked and loaded to be RB1s this next season. You throw in Pacheco, who, yes, is going to have to dodge the NFL draft, but if he dodges the NFL draft and starts the season as Kansas City's guy, you potentially have 4 startable running backs on your team. Going over looking at wide receiver, obviously Devontae Adams finds himself a good landing spot here. So Lamb, locked and loaded wide receiver 1. Harrison has that possibility this next year as well. We have upside with Rice and Ayuk coming off of injuries. I mean, we're runner-up in this league with Rice, Ayuk out for the season. A wide receiver, we have plenty of value and plenty of depth through. Tight end, we have, Evan Ingram getting cut. Obviously, Evan Ingram on the sharp decline here. We have Pat Frymuth as a serviceable option. I don't think Hampton's your man. And I don't think that you should be looking to consolidate assets at this time. Like you said, I think it maybe hurt you this past year because you had those season-long injuries, which obviously impossible for you to predict that Rice is going to go out for the year, right? Impossible for you to predict that Ayuk's going to go out for the year. But going into this next season, I think in a start 10 format, you're in a very comfortable spot where we have enough quarterback production, we have enough running back production, we have enough wide receiver production. I would almost rather hold on to that 111. I would not want to trade up at this point, because what is the price to trade up from the 111 to the 102? The 111 Chase Brown probably doesn't get you the 102. Realistically, I think the 111 Rashee Rice isn't getting you the 102. The price would have to be like you're trading the 111 Harrison in maybe a second to go up and get to that pick. I think you're much better off holding on to the 111, seeing what happens in the NFL draft, seeing what happens in your rookie draft. And I think because you've already traded away your 2026 first, you may be in a position where that 111 is better suited for you to go out there and trade for George Kittle, for you to go out there and trade for Mark Andrews, and put yourself in a spot where you have a well-rounded roster where we're actually able to go through and we're actually able to call ourselves the strongest contender in the league in 2025, win the league in 2025, and then maybe look to actually tear down and rebuild in 2026. Another possibility that I could be looking at here in terms of the second round picks, and I know this is maybe kind of idiotic here, but on these teams that are contenders, I actually like the idea of us deciding to go ahead and move off of late seconds, such as the 211, and pick up future second round picks. So like, you're a contending team, right? It's going to be very difficult for us to know when our rookie drafts here in May. Oh, this second round pick, I need to be trading it for Tony Pollard right now. I know the guy I need is DeAndre Swift. It's very difficult to figure out like, oh, okay, which one of these kind of dud veteran running backs are going to be guys that could help me contend this next season. I have no idea. I don't necessarily know if you do. I don't necessarily know if anybody does, right? But what you can do is say that 211, you can take that pick. You can try to trade it during your rookie draft for a 2026 second and third. And what we can end up doing with that second and third is during the season, if DeAndre Swift's producing, if Ramondre Stevenson's producing, if one of these random crap running backs is producing, then at that point, you can take that 2026 second and third and trade it for a running back that you know is actually going to help and give you value. So that's what I would be looking at right now, is trying to put yourself in a position where you have a lot of flexibility, because I think you already have a great team. I think you've already committed to contending this year. I think for you to trade up and try to put yourself in a position to get Hampton locked and loaded, I think it's probably going to cost too much. I would rather hold on to the 111, keep the flexibility. If you don't like a rookie that's on the clock by the time you're there, traded for Kittle, take those late seconds, stack additional 2026 second and thirds. That way we're able to go through and we're able to trade for veteran producers from rebuilding teams during the season when we know what we need and when we know who's producing. I know maybe that's not what you were looking for, but I think that's maybe a little bit of a better plan than trying to pigeonhole yourself into a different rookie that you may not necessarily need, because I think you already have a phenomenal team, my friend, to be completely honest with you. But let me go ahead and move this over to Carl Franz. Says, I barely missed getting into the championship round. Feel like this team's in a weird spot and wondering if I should down tier from Josh Allen. Definitely leaning running back with the 102. So this is to confirm. And I'm going to show y'all something that's disgusting here. A 16-team Superflex Start 10 format. So I know not everybody watching this has played in a 16-team Superflex league before. But a 16-team Superflex league is going to be crazy when it comes to specifically the supply and demand of the quarterback position. It is very, very difficult for you to find a starter. You do the easy math of where everybody wants 3 starting quarterbacks in a Superflex league. In a 12-team league, everybody's going to be able to get 2, and most teams can get 3. If everybody wants 3 quarterbacks in a Superflex league in a 16-team format, for every team that gets to 3 quarterbacks, there'll be a team with only 1 starter. So if you don't have the quarterback position, you can easily get screwed. And also with the 16-team format, it is going to get ugly real quick with some of this depth. Look at the worst teams in this league. These teams here could never dream of contending. These teams have absolutely no shot whatsoever. If you were looking at the top team here, overvalued draft picks, this team, just with its picks, plus Patrick Mahomes, Caleb Williams, Justin Jefferson, Chris Godwin, has about 10 times the amount of value as this team here at the very bottom. The disparity is going to be massive. It's going to be extremely difficult to get quarterbacks, and depth is going to be extremely valuable. It's like also start 10, 16 team league, there are 160 starters. Like if you played, say, in a start 8, 10 team format, which is a lot of redraft leagues, you're starting 80 guys across the league. Here you're starting double. Pulling this team up, this team is phenomenal. Quarterback, we have Josh Allen, Bo Nix. Obviously, we don't have a QB3, but it's very difficult to get a QB3 in a 16-team league. We have 2 QB1s for a 16-team format, both in the short and long term. The difficulty in trading away Josh Allen, which I know you mentioned, here in a 16-team format, I agree with you. If you could down tier from Josh Allen and pick up a ton of assets, like you can get the same price that you could in like a 12-team Superflex start 10 league, sure. But who is going to be able to afford Josh Allen in this league? Like maybe the overvalued draft picks team could, right? Maybe you could down tier from Josh Allen to Patrick Mahomes and pick up the 101. Maybe you could down tier from Josh Allen to Caleb Williams, pick up the 104, the 109. Like the Kings ransom that you would need to trade away Josh Allen, just nobody's going to have in this league. It's a 16-team format. So I think it's almost like pointless in trying to talk about a Josh Allen trade because I don't know who's going to be able to afford to buy Josh Allen here. I think quarterback, you're chilling. I think we stay as is. So running back going over, we have James Cook, RB1, top 16 guy in the short term, while at the same time, I think you can comfortably project him in the long term too. I'm going over and looking at what we have when it comes to Alvin Kamara. You can say top 16 running back in the short term. Long term, obviously going to be a little bit tougher to project that out. DeAndre Swift, maybe he's a top 32 running back. Maybe we have 3-4 viable guys if you include Tank Bigsby here at the running back position before we make any moves with that 102 pick, right? Going over and looking at wide receiver, Latin McConkey, Rome Odunze, both top 16 guys in my dynasty rankings. So both wide receiver ones in this format. Both can help you contend in the short term while at the same time, ton of long-term value. Looking at Chris Olave, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, probably top 16 wide receiver this season. So another wide receiver one. Obviously, in the long term, maybe not so much. But across the board, phenomenal wide receiver position. Sam Laporta, very, very easily top 16 guy in the short and long term. So this team, if you do nothing at this point, is already set to contend, right? Like, you don't have to worry about anything. Plus, we have the 102. Plus, we have the additional 2026 first-round pick. If I had to come up with something that this team could do, if you're wanting to down tier, which I'm completely fine doing in a 16-team format, I think it's from that 102 pick. I think it would be easier for somebody to be able to pay up for the 102 if we could move back, say, to the 103, to the 104, to the 105, to the 106, because hell, it's a 16-team Superflex League. Cam Ward, honestly, in a 16-team Superflex League would be my 102. I'm taking Cam Ward over Hampton in a 16-team Superflex League. I think that's the move to make. Like, an example is if you could take the 102 and trade back with this overvalued draft picks team and get back the 104 and the 113, hell, I'm game for that. If you can take the 102 and trade with this MMM team, get back Breece Hall, say, you're not going to be able to get Breece in JSN. And maybe Breece 115, maybe you need a little bit more. Yeah, I would need more if it was me. Trade the 102, and this goes back to the issue of, like, hell, it's a 16-team league. Who can afford to do this? Trade back from the 102 to the 107 and pick up an additional future first. I think that could be a no-brainer. The issue is this team, hell, they're probably rebuilding, right? This team is Blake Watson, Dalvin Cook, Miles Sanders, their running backs. Like, how the hell are they going to convince themselves that they'll contend if they can get the 102 in their hands? But if you were to make a move, that's the trade. You're trading away the 102 and you're getting back a future first. If you were to make a different move, it's trading that extra 2026 first-round pick that you have and maybe going and putting yourself in a position to get another running back. But again, I wouldn't do that till during the season. You're a contending team. There's no rush to do anything now. You can take that additional 2026 first-round pick that you have, trade it during the year once we actually see, oh yeah, Joe Mixon's running back. Joe Mixon's the running back 3 in points per game right now. It's week 6. And I'm clearly a contending team. DeAndre Swift's not doing anything. I could use another running back. That team with Joe Mixon's an absolute bum. Let's send him my future first and let's go get Joe Mixon. But again, there's no way in hell I'm doing that before the season starts. You have all the power. You have all the flexibility. So do not tear down from Josh Allen unless you get a King's ransom. And I don't see how anybody can afford a King's ransom in this league. If you were to go through and if you were to make a tier down, I think it's from the 102 because I think you make an argument that the 102 is actually Cam Ward in this format. If you're leaning running back, there are a bunch of different running backs depending on how the NFL draft goes. I think you can move down to like the 107, pick up an additional first, call it a day. So if you were to tier down, it's from the 102. If you were to make a move during the season, it's selling that extra first and going and getting an additional veteran. But you already have such a phenomenal team. Look at the value differential between the top 3 teams in this league and the rest of them for a 16-team format. Hold on to Josh Allen tight because, I mean, in this format, him alone is going to help you contend. And it would be very different if you were one of those bottom teams, right? If you were a bottom team and you're like, man, I got no shot to contend, then yeah, maybe you are forced to go ahead. Maybe you are forced to actually, I don't know, make that trade. But let's go ahead and let's dive into our next team. This is going to be D Boomer. It says running backs are very hard to attain in our league. Well, it's a 14-team format, so I completely understand. DeAndre Swift just moved for 2 firsts straight up. Here's what you do in that instance. DeAndre Swift sold for 2 firsts. You sell every running back that you have for rookie picks. You hope those rookie picks end up being high picks, and you reset with rookie running backs. Bijan's on a team that would not be movable unless for 4 first-round picks. Well, I'd way rather pay for 4 first-round picks for Bijan than 2 first-round picks for Swift. One team's rebuilding and has 8 first-rounders this year and intends to draft with them all. So getting into this draft would be tough. This is something that I've seen like people kind of panic with, right? Where if they are sitting in a dynasty league with all the rookie picks, and this is more I've seen people like panic when they have all the picks. And they go, oh my gosh, I was rebuilding. I have 7, I have 8 picks in the first round of this year's rookie draft. I don't want to take all these rookies. I need to sell these picks now. The reality of the situation is you're going to get to your rookie draft. Half the league's boxed out, and they're probably going to want in. You can actually probably sell those picks at an upcharge. You're in control. So what I would advise on the opposite end is if there's somebody in your league that has 8 first-round picks, I'm not panicking and going through and trading a bunch of things just so we can get into the draft. But looking at the league setup, you have the team here at 1 with a significant amount of value. This is Grit Gang. They have Chase, Neighbors, JSN, Harrison, Wilson, Bijan in a 14-team format, right? This team is significantly better than any other team in the league. You can see that immediately with the bar chart here with the league power rankings. But then outside of that, teams 2 through 8 are all about the same. Then you have a significant drop off to teams 9 through 14 that have absolutely no shot to contend. So we are kind of in that middle tier of like, yeah, we're around. We're not the juggernaut in the league, but we are here. Don't disrespect us. And we are sitting in a spot where we're fine. I mean, particularly to contend this year. I think that if that's your main goal, you are in a decent spot. And hell, we have rookie picks as well. Looking at quarterback, we have Kyler and Tua, right? So I'm not going to sit here and act like this is the strongest position to ever be in. But I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not like we can't contend because of our quarterback position. No, it's a 14-team format. Wouldn't it be surprising whatsoever to see Kyler Murray be a top 14 quarterback, provide you with QB1 production, and we end up being completely fine. Going over and looking at running back, we have Breece, Derrick Henry, Pacheco. Definitely 3 contending pieces, right? If I'm a rebuilding roster, I'm looking to sell every single one of these running backs. And honestly, even if it's a 14-team format, if you're telling me DeAndre Swift just got dealt for 2 first-round picks, even if it's a 14-team, 1-quarterback league where running backs are very hard to come by, if you can go through and if you can trade Isaiah Pacheco, you can get a first, second, third, I'm doing it. You get a first-round pick this year and first-round pick next year, I'm doing it. But outside of that, you are looking like you're able to contend with this running back room. Going over to what we have at wide receiver, we have St. Brown, we have A.J. Brown, we have Rice, we have DJ Moore, we have Cortland Sutton. We have 5 startable wide receivers, 4 of whom I think are very much live to be top 14 options and wide receiver ones this next season. I mean, you can start all these guys. It's a start 10, 1 quarterback, 4. It's a start 8 format. So let me walk that back. Realistically, under the assumption 2 wide receivers, 2 flex spots, we can start 4 of them. So maybe Sutton's riding the pine, but at the end of the day, we're going to have bye weeks. We're going to have injuries. We don't necessarily know the availability of Rice. So wide receiver, we're in a very comfortable spot to contend. So to be completely honest, I think the only move to potentially make on this team is, one, if you're telling me DeAndre Swift's going for 2 first-round picks in this league, is I'm throwing Pacheco on the block and I'm seeing if somebody's willing to overpay, particularly before the NFL draft. Second thing being is if we are looking at the bottom teams here that, again, presumably have no shot to make any noise, have no shot to contend, we have a bunch of these second rounders that maybe we can just pick off veteran pieces from their team. Like going and looking at this team, again, if you're telling me that one team has 8 first-round picks as well, there should be a lot of teams trying to get into the rookie draft. This team's sitting here with Keon Coleman, Caleb Williams. They have nobody. If you could maybe pick off, send them in a 14-team format, the 207, and get Keon Coleman. In a 14-team league, that's like pick 21 for Keon Coleman. I think you could do that, and maybe it has a better shot of helping you contend than what you actually would have with the 207. I'm going over and looking at this other team, 4th and Drunk. Like this team, as an example, they have no shot to contend. Their best wide receiver is Josh Downs. They have Kenneth Walker. They have a viable running back. Is there a world in which we can tier up, which I know we don't necessarily want to do a ton in 14-team formats, but it's only a start 8 league. Is there a world in which we can tier up from Isaiah Pacheco with a couple of these rookie picks that we have to get up to Kenneth Walker? Can you trade Pacheco, the 203, the 303, the 312, and can we go get Kenneth Walker before the NFL draft? I think that would be very interesting from a rebuilder perspective. Maybe they think that they're getting additional value when it comes to those rookie picks. This team here, that their best running back is going to be Tajee Spears. Is there a world in which we can send them a second and a third for Chris Godwin? Trade wins legends. And maybe they think they have a shot to contend. Mainly those bottom of 4 or 5 teams. But again, I think that's probably the most interesting move to be made on this team in particular, is seeing if we can move off of a second and a third to either upgrade over Pacheco to another running back. Or maybe if we can go ahead and if we can try to sell maybe a pivot from a Rashee Rice and a second to go get an older veteran that could be more interesting for us this season. And another thing to consider, right, is with those particularly late round picks, and I know we already talked about this with another review, but if you're in a situation in which, and you've already done such a good job of this, is say we're in this year's rookie class and you're like, yeah, I'm completely done with the draft halfway through the third round. 14-team league, so, I mean, the rounds are going to be deeper. But if you can take the 311, 312, move them and get a second rounder in 2026 and be able to leverage that second round pick during the season to go out there and actually trade for a veteran when we need the production, I think that could give you the flexibility on a contending roster as well. That could help here. Now, again, with that being said, you are in a situation in which you already have a crap ton of seconds, a crap ton of thirds in 2026. So I think a lot of the depth on your team maybe isn't necessarily needed, particularly because you can trade for it during the season if need be. Like, you have that ripcord that you can always pull. So I think you're in a phenomenal spot as is. Any trades, I think we're looking at those teams at the very bottom of this league that are absolute garbage, sending them some of these picks, trying to pry some of the veterans off their team where it makes sense. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with that, my friend. But again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock. Let's move this over and look at our next team with Go Gators 8765 says, I feel quite stuck with this team. Would it be wise to move off my high quality players like Jonathan Taylor and one of Young and Lawrence? Also, what other players would I be able to get value for that are older? And last question, is Tet likely the pick at the 102? I need to update my rankings on the site because I do not think Tet is locked into the 102 anymore. And because if you are looking at the 102, there's just a wide range of outcomes of what that player can be with the NFL draft. If any of the top running backs like Judkins, Hampton find themselves in a great landing spot, Henderson, like the Chiefs, like the Chargers, like the Bears, they immediately vault up to be that 102 pick, especially if they have the NFL draft capital, right? So I think it's almost impossible to know who the 102 is now. I know a lot of people are just saying, oh, it's locked in Tet, it's locked in Hampton. I think that really the 101 is going to be locked and loaded for Genty, and then beyond that, it could be anything, but the 102 is still a lot more valuable than, say, the 104, because you are going to get to make that decision yourself when we have all the information at our disposal. But team name is Tyreek's Kid. Recognize a lot of the names in this league. Looking at the squad, this is a 12-team, 2 quarterbacks, start 11, full PPR format. So this is a deeper league. This is pretty much the setup for all the flock leagues, right? And this is definitely a team that I want to be on record. You can't contend with this. Jalen McMillan's our wide receiver 2. Michael Mayer's our top tight end. We just earned the 102 this past season. I definitely think any asset that is hard to see have more value 12 months from now is a sell. And again, I know you've probably heard me say this a bunch, but how we're looking at this is a team that should be looking to rebuild. This is a team that should be looking to play for 2026. And how we are attacking that approach. Let me know if y'all can hear this chair squeaking. This is a different chair. I maybe need to swap it. But how we are approaching that is we are looking at options specifically that we do not believe can gain value 12 months from now. So say like Jonathan Taylor, I could very easily see somebody making the argument going, Mason, you know what? Jonathan Taylor is not going to fall off. Jonathan Taylor in 2026 could be scoring more fantasy points than he's going to score this season. I could very easily see that argument. However, the issue comes in, how does Jonathan Taylor get ranked higher than the RB7 in Dynasty next offseason than he is today? Just given his age and given how the Dynasty community treats these veteran running backs. Jonathan Taylor, realistically, would probably have to be the top 2 running back in points per game for him to be higher than RB7 in Dynasty rankings next offseason. This is a running back that was drafted in 2020, I want to say. Right? Yes. He's going to be 27 next offseason. Like, obviously, Saquon Barkley was able to gain value on that second contract at 27 years old. But how Saquon Barkley did it is he was not only the RB1, but he was the RB1 by a country mile. So, I don't know. If I am looking at this, I would say any asset that is not necessarily, I don't need to say guaranteed, but likely to increase value 12 months from now is a piece that we need to sell on a contending team. So Drake May, can he be worth 12 months from now than he is today? Yes, that could very easily happen. I don't think you need to sell him. Trevor Lawrence, could he be worth more 12 months from now than he is today? Yes, I could very easily see that happen. I don't think you need to sell him. Bryce Young, same thing. Could very easily be worth more 12 months from now than he is today. So quarterbacks, I don't agree with the sentiment that we need to be selling Trevor Lawrence. I don't really agree with the sentiment that we need to be selling Bryce Young. Aaron Rodgers, the issue is you're not going to be able to sell him for anything right now. I mean, if you can cash out and get a second and a third round pick, then yeah, we'll sell Aaron Rodgers. But the problem with that is you're not going to be able to get that price, right? Going over and looking at what we have with Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, I don't see a path unless he does just have a Saquon Barkley level season for him to be worth much more next offseason than he is today. If Jonathan Taylor's the RB10 in fantasy points per game, he's worth less next offseason than he is today. So Taylor's the guy that we sell here. Tony Pollard most likely is worth less next offseason than he is today. DeAndre Swift most likely worth less next offseason than he is today. This is the group of guys that we are looking to sell. Worthy, McMillan, Leggett, completely fine holding on to them. They can move up in value. Keenan Allen goes into the Aaron Rodgers bucket of like nobody's trading for him. If you can get a second or a third, sell off of them, but you're not going to be able to get that. So really the only sells in my mind here are going to be the running back position. Now, I think you can do this a couple different ways. I think that the first thing that we look to do, of course, is actually go over and look at some of these teams that should be contending that maybe need help at running back. This team has Breeze, Chase Brown. I don't necessarily know if they're super excited to go through, and I don't know if they're super excited to trade for, say, Jonathan Taylor. But maybe they could be looking at the 109. Do they have any assets that are contending pieces? That are rebuilding pieces that could help us, but not necessarily help them. I don't really see anything. Eating W's. This is a team that doesn't particularly need help at the running back position. Keon Coleman, you could label as a rebuilding piece, but it's not like them selling the 111 and Keon Coleman's going to get us anywhere close to the 102. So I don't particularly see a trade that makes sense with them. This team doesn't necessarily need a running back. They have Barkley, CMC, Kamara. Rebuilding pieces, they don't really have anything to trade for the 102. This team could use some running back depth, right? I mean, they have Pacheco as their RB3. This could be a candidate to try to go through and send DeAndre Swift, try to send Tony Pollard and try to sell them that they need some running back depth. I mean, maybe if you could swap, say, DeAndre Swift and get their 2026 second and third, I think that'd be very interesting. Obviously, if you can take their first round pick, it'd be a no-brainer. It just ain't happening. Going over and looking at this team, this is a good example of a team that, yeah, probably could actually contend this season. However, at the same time, they need running back production, right? They're solid at quarterback, solid at tight end, solid at wide receiver. If you threw them Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, this is a team that all of a sudden could be at the very top of the power rankings in terms of expectations for this season. And also, they do at the same time have rookie picks to potentially make that move. My first offer for them is, of course, not necessarily the lowest I'd take, but I mean, if you could just approach them and go, hey, if you really wanted to contend, I'll give you all my running backs. And see if we can pivot off of Jonathan Taylor, go look at the 103, that could be an asset like Hampton that's worth a lot more next offseason than it is today. But at the same time, not necessarily stop there and also try to send them those depth pieces at a slight premium. So if you can sell them, as an example, say Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, and Tony Pollard, and get the 103 and a 2026 first round pick in return, then at that point, you're set up in a position to have two assets that can accrue in value going into next season. So I think this would be the perfect trade partner for us to make that type of deal with. This is a team that's very interesting. I could see how they think that they could contend. I mean, I don't necessarily know if they can pay a price that makes sense for us to get, say, send them Jonathan Taylor. Maybe if you wanted to send them like Jonathan Taylor and a quarterback such as Trevor Lawrence and try to pivot over to a quarterback you're more excited about, such as CJ Stroud. Maybe that could be something that's looked at, but just not a clear win-win. This is another example, right? This team has realistically a garbage running back room. Charbonnet, Jalen Warren. And they also kind of need help at quarterback. If you're not in love with Trevor Lawrence, if you're not in love with Bryce Young, you don't have to sell those guys. They're just not necessarily immediately the players I'd look to sell on a rebuilding roster. And they actually have some of these assets at wide receiver, particularly, that could be interesting on a rebuilding team, such as Jordan Addison, right? One of these younger players. So maybe this is an instance where it makes sense for you to go through and take that piece like Jonathan Taylor, see if we can pivot off of Jonathan Taylor, get, I don't know, maybe even Marvin Harrison. Pivot from JT, go over and get Harrison. You could very easily see a world where 12 months from now, Harrison's worth more while Jonathan Taylor's worth less. Go and see if we can pivot from some of those veteran running backs and go get the 108. See if you can pivot from a quarterback like Bryce Young and hit the reset button and go get the 108. I think that this is another potential trade partner for us. This team, I just particularly don't see. I mean, obviously, if you can trade from the 102 and get back like the 106 at a 2026 first, I think that's a no-brainer. This is another team that could use running back production. I mean, there are three teams here that are clearly teams that are maybe a player or two away from contending at the running back position that have assets that they can send to us. This team has the 105, right? Is there a world where we can send them our depth running backs, such as, say, Pollard, Swift, as well as a quarterback on top of it, such as Bryce Young, give them a quarterback, give them the running back pieces, and get back to the 105? Obviously, that's a little bit more of a stretch. But I think those are three great teams that we can reach out to that you can actually structure win-win deals around. But for me, I don't think the answer is selling Lawrence, Bryce Young. I think the answer is selling the running backs. If you can trade back from the 102 and pick up an additional future first as well, I think that would be interesting. But I think we're probably going to make this the last team review of this live stream. I really do appreciate you, my friend. And yeah, probably will be streaming a little more often. Now I needed to set up this little studio thing for me. And by that, what I really just needed to do is get the, it's embarrassing, but get the Wi-Fi working. The Wi-Fi wasn't working initially. But we talked about, obviously, the free agent stuff. And at the same time, we actually did an updated Dynasty Startup mock draft at the beginning of this live stream. So if you want to see that Dynasty Startup mock, go to the beginning. I updated my rankings on the site already. And yeah, we're going to get to a bunch of those team reviews on the site. Probably live stream again, maybe tomorrow or the next day. Probably the next day. Give myself a day off. I don't necessarily know if we're going to go every day straight. But yeah, we have a bunch of teams to look at. Really do appreciate you. And I will be getting you updated Dynasty rankings on the YouTube channel later in the week, but it's going to take us some time to make those videos where the rankings are already on the site as is. But much love. Really appreciate you. And really hope that I'm able to see you with the next live stream that we do.